Okay, if you're ready, please sum up so I can see, make sure everyone is ready. They are reading the textbook. So one more time, please sum up. I want to see if you guys are ready. Okay, good, awesome. So let's take a look at this question. So QPP has plant and equipment that have been evaluated for impairment periodically in response to changing conditions in the industry. The plant and the equipment together form a cash generating unit. So remember, when we're talking about impairment testing, right? It's very important. First, you have to decide what's the smallest identifiable cash generating units, right? Because that's related to the calculation of the value in use, right? You remember the examples I give you. We have to determine what's the recoverable amount. And the recoverable amount is the higher of the value in use and fair value less selling cost, right? So you have to get this value in use, right? So it's important you know what's the cash generating unit in the question. In this case, it's the plant and the equipment together. They were purchased in 2011 for 100 million for plant and 84 million for equipment. As of the acquisition date, the plant had an estimated useful life of 25 years. The equipment, 12 years. So QPP used the straight line depreciation method and recorded a full year of depreciation in the year of acquisition. Okay. So in some companies, they would have a policy saying in the year of acquisition, they are going to use a half-year rule, right? They only consider 50% of the depreciation. In this question, in the year of acquisition, even though they may not purchase at the beginning of the year, but they would recognize a 4 years of depreciation, okay? The company has a December 31st year end. So they made a purchase in 2011. At the beginning of 2016, QPP wrote down the plant and the equipment for impairment, okay? 5 years later, due to the decline in the prices of newsprint and other papers product, the impairment loss incurred. So the recoverable amount of the plant was estimated to be 110 million, the equipment 42 million. Okay? And then at the beginning of 2019, so 3 years later after the impairment loss recognition, the prices of paper product later recovered. Okay, so the company re-evaluated the impairment of its plant and equipment. The new recoverable amounts were 105 million for the plant and 25 million for the equipment. Okay. So the first question is asking, determine the amount of depreciation for 2011 to 2015. Determine the amount of depreciation for 2011 and 2015. Okay. Anyone tell me what that's going to be for 2011 to 2015? So the cost for plant, that's 150 million, right? Okay, so what's the depreciation method? Straight line amortization, right? Straight line depreciation for how many years? 25 years, right? That's easy. So you just use 150 million divided by 25 years, right? So that's going to be 6 million a year, 6 million 1 year. Okay, so that's the plan. Are you able to see my handwritings clearly?
If you can make it bigger, please.
Make it bigger. How can I do that? So I think that the size is really about the distance of the camera and my paper. And unfortunately, my document camera is not adjustable. So I'm not able to lower the camera to zoom in. So
It's okay, thank you.
yeah, sorry for that. So that's the plan. And maybe I will write it bigger. Okay, I will write bigger size. So then the equipment, for the equipment, so the acquired cost is 84 million, right? And then the useful life is 12 years. Okay, then it's 7 million per year, right? 7 million per year. So this should be pretty straightforward, right? Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, so this is A. Now let's take a look at B. This is A. Let's take a look at B. B is asking determine the amount of impairment loss for 2016. Okay, determine the amount of impairment loss for 2016. So why don't I give you maybe 2 minutes for you to work on this. Determine the amount of impairment loss for 2016. So you have 2 minutes to work on this. Basically, you compare two values, right? The carrying amount versus recoverable amount, right? If carrying amount is larger, greater than the recoverable amount, that means we have to recognize the impairment loss. And the difference between the two is going to be the amount of impairment loss. Right? You have to figure it out at the beginning, okay, of 2016, what is the carrying amount and what is the recoverable amount, right? Once you know that two numbers, then it's easy to test whether you need to record impairment. If yes, what amount of impairment? If you are done, just shout it out and let me know, okay?
Is the impairment amount 10 million for the plant and 7 million for the equipment?
Philip, can you tell me what is the amount of impairment loss for the plant?
10 million?
10 million, that's correct. How about for equipment?
7 million?
Very good, awesome. Okay, so this is how we do it, right? So first, you want to know what's the carrying value at the beginning of 2016. Sorry, I need to change the pen. at 20 of 2016, right? You want to know what's the carrying value at the beginning of 2016, okay? So you know the cost. The cost is for the plant, right? For the plant is 150 million. And what's the cumulative depreciation? Okay, so that's 5 years, right? So you bought it in 2011, beginning of 2011. Now we are talking about the beginning of 2016. So there are 5 years. Okay, so in the acquisition year, you recognize a full year of depreciation. So 5 years depreciation, and every year we calculate is 6 million every year. So I'm going to use 5 times 6. I have 30 million cumulative depreciation. So my carrying value for the plant is 120. Okay. In the question, information is given that the recoverable amount, so that's going to be 110. Okay, that's the recoverable. So when you compare 120 versus 110, you know that 120 is greater than 110. That means there's impairment, and the difference is 10 million for the plant. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then for the equipment, the cost is 84, right? Depreciation 5 year, each year is 7 million, each year is 7. So 5 times 7, I get 35. Okay. So my carrying value would be the difference, 84 minus 35. That's going to be 49. No? Yeah, 49. Okay. And what's the recoverable amount? Recoverable amount is 42. Okay. So again, 49 is greater than 42. So carrying is greater than recoverable. That means you have to recognize impairment. Okay. And you're going to recognize $7 million impairment. Are they okay with this question? Yes or no?
Yep.
Okay so far.
Okay, good. So let's go with C. Okay, let's go with C. Determine the amount of depreciation for 2016 to 2018. Okay, so this is the, we talked about the depreciation, okay, may change after the revaluation, right, after the impairment. So we know that the carrying value right now, the depreciable amount, that's the carrying value, now is 110 for plant and 42 for equipment. Okay. How many years left useful life? How many years left the useful life? 20
for
plant,
the plant and 7 for the equipment.
7 for the, very good, right? Because initially is 25 for the plant. 5 years later, only 20 left. For equipment, initially is 12. 5 years later is 7, right? 7 left. Okay. So now, okay, let's calculate the depreciation. So that's easy, right? 110 divided by 20. So 5.5 million for the plant, and 42 divided by 7, 6 million every year. 6 million every year. Right? So I don't have to say more about this, right? Okay, are we okay?
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Okay, yeah.
So why are the carrying values 110 and 42? I guess I know where you got them from, but why wouldn't you allocate the 17 million total impairment to the plant and the equipment?
So that's a very good question, right? Because in the lecture I mentioned that you assess this in terms of a unit, right? Cash generating unit, right? So if you remember in those questions, right? So the recoverable amount would be actually given as a sum, right? So you don't know the recoverable amount for each individual asset, right? You know what's the recoverable amount for the total asset. If you remember that we have equipment, if you remember what happened is we have machine A, B, C, right? So then it tells us that what's the fair value minus selling cost, right? And then what's the value in use, right? And so then they give you a bunch of numbers here, right? They give you a bunch of numbers here, and then they say total. But then here, value in use is NA, right? NA, NA. They give you a total here, right? So then when we are dealing with this question, we are dealing with the unit, right? So now the higher of these two numbers, that is the recoverable amount, right? Okay. So in this question, we know we were given these numbers, right? We were given these numbers. Otherwise, you could go the other way, but they may not be the most accurate. Let's say if we do that way, okay? If we do that way, so basically, let's say, what is my recoverable amount? So you are saying my recoverable amount would be, my total recoverable amount would be, so the first number is 110, right? Plus 42, right? So now for this unit, my recoverable amount is 152, right? Total recoverable amount is 152. What's my total carrying amount? Total carrying amount. What's the total carrying amount? So that would be 120 plus 49. So that would be 169. Okay. So the total impairment loss I need to allocate. That would be the difference, right? Which is 14, right? Which is 14? No, 17. And if you remember, we allocated 10 to plant, and we allocate 7 to equipment, right? So now this is 17, okay? This is 17. Then what happened is I'm going to allocate this 17 proportionally, right? Based on their carrying amount, right? So here, the carrying amount for the plant equipment, this is 120, this is 42, right? And in the total, no, sorry, this is 120, this is This is 49. Yeah. And the total is 169, right? Now I need to calculate the proportion. Proportion for P is 120 divided by 169. And this proportion is 49 divided by 169, right? Now I'm going to apply my total impairment loss. So 120, 169 times 17. That's how much I'm going to allocate to the P, right? And 49 divided by 169 times 17. That's how much I'm going to allocate to E, right? Can anyone help me to calculate this number? If you have a calculator, can you please help me to calculate this number? Maybe I have a calculator. Just give me a second. $120 divided by 169 times 17. So I need to allocate. So 12 for this one is 12.07. So the other one should be 17, 4.93. Is this calculation correct? Is my number correct?
Yes,
Yes.
it's correct.
Okay, so now what happened, right? So if you allocate it this way, so what's your carrying value after the impairment recognition, right? So you're gonna use 120 minus 12.07, right? That would be your new carrying amount, right? Then this number would be 107.93. Right? Is that correct? So 120 minus 12.07.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and for this number would be 49 minus 4.93. So that would be 44.07, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you are saying that now the value should be this two, right? But in the question, you told us this number is 110, right? This number is 42, right? In the question, we were told this number is 110, number is 42. If you followed the proportional method, you're going to get 44 and 107. So you see why I go the other approach? Does this answer your question?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, right. So in the question, remember I told you, in the machine ABC, right? This value in use is NA, right? And so you can know what's the recoverable value for the total, right? But in this case, it's not NA. That number is given, right? That number is given. So you can know right away what's the recoverable value for A because this number is given.
Okay, so even though it says in the question like that together the plant and equipment are a cash generating unit, because you know what the value and use is, you don't need to allocate. Is that correct?
Yeah, because basically you need to reflect that machine's recoverable value, right? So basically you can see that the total amount of impairment loss is the same, right? So whichever way you are using, the total amount of the impairment loss is 17, right? So if you go my way, it's times 7, right? Together is 17. If you calculate this way differently, 107.93, 44.07, this way, together this one is also 17, right? So it does not affect the total amount of impairment loss. It just affects allocation. So then you want to ask yourself, which way is the better allocation? Is the proportional way is the better allocation, or the way I'm using 10-7? And the answer is the 10-7 is a better valuation, right? Based on the information given, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So now let's take a look at B. Okay. So we were here. This is where we were at. C. Now let's take a look at D. Okay. D. So for D, determine the amount of impairment loss for 2019. Okay, for 2019. In 2019, what happened is the price of paper product later recovered. Okay, at the beginning of 2019, the company reevaluate the impairment. Okay, and then they have a new recoverable amount. Okay, they have a new recoverable amount for machine and for the plant and for the equipment. Okay, so let's think about this. So we want to know what's the depreciation for 2019. Okay, for 2019. So what should we do? Okay, what do we need to record further impairment? Do you think? Or maybe it's an impairment reversal. Just think of this conceptually, right? Let's not, before we do any calculation, just think about it. They give us information. Do you think we are going to record further impairment loss, or we may have a recovery reversal? Anyone? So it says that the prices of paper products later recovered. The products of the paper later are recovered. So then you think about the cash flows in the future, right? It's going to be higher, right? Because the price is higher, right? And then if the cash flows will be higher, then your present value of future cash flows, right? Your value in use will be higher. Is that correct? Right? So your recoverable amount will be higher. But you may say, no, it's not higher. In 2016, it's actually 110 million. But now, at the beginning of 2019, it's 105 million, right? But don't forget, 3 years has passed. What is the amount of accumulated depreciation you have recognized for 3 years? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So, what is my carrying value for the plant and the equipment at the beginning of 2019? So how many years later? 3 years later, right?
110 million.
So you start at the beginning of 2016. 110, 42, right? That's your starting point at the beginning of 2016. And 3 years later, right, you're going to have some cumulative depreciation. 3 years times what? Can anyone tell me? Times what?
5.5 million.
Good, 5 times 5 million. And for the equipment, 3 years times
6 million.
Okay. So this gives me 16.5.
18.
So one gives me 18. So now the difference will be my carrying value, right? So this one is gonna be
3.5.
thank you 33.5 sorry 93.5, and this one is gonna be 24, right? 24. Okay, so now they tell me that the recoverable value, right, for the plant is 105, correct? For the equipment is 25, right? The information given, recoverable amount, is that right? Come on, is this right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, if I compare these two, so that means, you know, I need to have a reversal, impairment reversal, right? Because my carrying value now is lower than the recoverable amount, right? So I need to do a impairment reversal. Is that correct? So I want raise this carrying value to 105. I want to raise this 24 to 225. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Anyone else? There's a very important piece we have to consider.
Would you have to consider the unimpaired carrying value?
Yeah, very good. So you can recover, but only up to the value if there's no impairment ever being recorded, right? Okay, so what is the value? Okay, there's a competing value for each of these two numbers. Okay? Now I need to calculate the unimpaired value. Okay, so suppose you didn't do any impairment. You bought it in 2011, so 150. Now is 2019. How many years has passed?
8 years.
80 years, right? So each year you recognize 6 million, right? That's your amortization, right? So 6 times 8, right? Right? So that's 42, 46 plus 48. So your unimpaired carrying value would be 102, right? 102, right? So do you think you can write 93.5 to 105? Yes or no? The answer is no, right? Because you cannot recover the value more than the unimpaired value, right? Unimpaired value. So you can only recover up to this number, okay? 102. Okay? So 102 minus 93.5. This is how much impairment reversal you can do for the plant. Okay, so this is plant. For the equipment, you have 84. Start with 84. So you have 80 years. Each year 7 million each year. Here 7 million each year times 80 years. That's 56. Okay, the difference is 28. Okay. Now, can you write it up to 125? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, right? Because you are allowed to write up to 28, right? You can't go over 28. But if you want to write it up to 125, that's fine. So for the equipment, 25 minus 24, 1 for equipment. Okay? And for the plant, this is going to be 5, 8, yeah, 8.5. 8.5. 1 for the equipment. So this is a reversal, right? This is a reversal. So you reverse the impairment loss. Does this make sense?
Can you repeat, please, for the equipment? Why is it 1 million?
Okay. So here, your carrying value is 24, right? The recoverable amount is 25, okay? So you would think, right, I should write to 25, okay? But am I allowed to go that high, to 25? My benchmark is the unimpaired carrying value, okay? So I calculate my unimpaired carrying value as 28. So the benchmark is 28. So 25 is still under this benchmark. I'm allowed to write up to 25. So I use my recoverable amount minus my carrying value. That is the recovery, right? Recovery. So if you remember, in which question? In question B, you write off $7 million for equipment. So in 2016, you recognize $7 million impairment loss on equipment. And so at the beginning of 2019, because the price of the papers has recovered a little bit, okay, so you were able to recover $1 million of the loss you recognize the previous. Does that make sense? Do you understand this? Nobody say anything.
So I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Claire.
So when you were calculating the impairment value about the plant and the equipment, you used 6 million for 1 year.
Yeah.
But during 2016 to 2018, the annual depreciation was 5.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you only use 6 million?
Yeah,
To calculate
that's a very good question, right? So when you're talking about impairment, that means they are suppose it's in parallel. Suppose in another scenario, okay, there was no impairment has ever been recognized. But suppose that at the beginning of 2016, there was no impairment loss, okay? So in that scenario, what is your carrying value at the beginning of 2019? Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that would be, in that scenario, So you purchased in 2011, right? And at the
Mhm.
end of 2019, 8 years has passed, right? So,
Yeah.
and because you did not recognize impairment, so your depreciation is the same every year, right? For plant, it would be 6 million a year. For equipment, it would be 7 million a year, right? So that's why I
Oh,
use 6 million times 8 years, 7 million times years, 8 years. Calculate the total depreciation for that scenario. Okay? For that scenario, when there, suppose there was never have been impairment loss. Okay?
oh yeah. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So that's my reference point, right? That's my reference point. So later on, okay, in my scenario, in my I have the impairment scenario. In that scenario, whenever I need to have impairment and recovery, I can never go over the reference point set up by the unimpairment scenario.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So it's kind of like this, right? So if you draw a picture, right? So you have a value. So if this is an impairment scenario, okay? Basically, you start with a value, right? Then this value start going down, right? Going down by depreciation, right? And then at this point, okay, I'm gonna draw a picture. So this is your x, this is your y. X is your time, y is the carrying value, okay? So if I draw a picture, you have all taken economics, right? You should know these two dimensions plots, right? So you have x as time over time, the years, and y as your carrying value. So this line should a straight line because it's a straight line amortization. Okay, so you go from your cost. This is 0 in the year of acquisition. Here is your cost. Okay, and that is just going down, following a straight line, right? A slope, because it's a straight line amortization. So for how many years? 5 years, right? This is year 5. This is 2011, 2016, right? So in 2016, you recognize a loss, right? Impairment loss. So this number just go down, right? Go down like that. Now it's at this point, right? At this point. Now you follow another amortization, okay? This amortization is flatter, okay? Let me see, 6 million. What is that? 6 million, 5.5. So 5.5 is smaller than 6. So it's going to be flatter, right? Because you do not recognize as many annual depreciation as before. So then for another, I think it's 3 years, right? 2019. Okay. In 2019, that's the question. The picture would be like this. So in 2019, right? I needed to evaluate if I can move it up, right? Impairment reversal, I can move up this. Okay. So the question is, what if there's no impairment? What's the picture would be like if there's no impairment? Can anyone tell me? What's the picture should be like if there's no impairment?
So you just extend your first part of the line.
Very
until
good. Thank you.
In
Right?
3 years.
Yeah. So basically, you just extend this line, right? Because there's no impairment. So you just keep going like this. I use dashed line because this is a hypothetical line, right? This solid line is really what happened. You did recognize the impairment loss, right? So the idea is now, okay, if you want to bump this up, this is 2019. If you bump it up, you cannot go over this dashed line, right? This dashed line is kind of your benchmark. So you can't say, I'm going here, okay? So this is wrong. This is wrong, right? So the maximum you can go is this point, okay? That's the maximum you can go is this point. right? It's not just treat it like nothing had happened, right? You won't gain anything, right? The idea is you do not, by going through impairment test, you do not gain on anything, right? So you're supposed to be at this point carrying value if there's no impairment. But guess what? By doing an impairment test and doing an impairment reversal, guess what? Your carrying value now is even higher, right? That doesn't make sense, right? So that's the whole idea, right? Because impairment loss is about recognizing the bad news, right? So impairment testing is about telling the users the bad news. If you do this, you are telling them a good news. Okay, you are telling them a good news. So you can just go up to this point. You cannot go beyond. Okay. See, my math background, my physics background is useful in terms of explaining accounting concepts. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it
Oh,
does.
I make it even more confusing. Okay, if it makes sense, sum up. If it doesn't, don't sum up, so that I know what happened. 2, 3. So, okay, Claire, you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know how to sum up. Oh, here.
Okay. So yeah, just this is the whole idea, right? You know, you do not go over this dash line. Okay. This dash line is anything under is bad news. Anything higher is good news. And the impairment testing is about telling the bad news, right? So you can't go over, right? So when you recover, you can only recover up to this unimpaired value, okay? You cannot go over. So back to this question, okay? So the unimpaired is 102 for the plant, okay? Here is 102, okay? That's 102. At this point, the recoverable amount is 105, okay? So you cannot go to 105. You can only go to 102, okay? That's the maximum you can go. So therefore, when you reverse, you use the 102 minus 93.5 instead of using 105, okay? You recognize a reversal of 8.5. So what happened if you use 105? If you use 105, right? 105 minus 93.5, you're gonna have 11.5, okay? So here you're gonna recognize 11.5 impairment reversal. But remember, in 2016, you only recognize $10 million of impairment loss, right? So in 2016, you only recognize the $10 million of impairment. And now you are saying, I'm gonna reverse $11.5 million impairment. That doesn't make sense, right?
Okay.
Then you will say, well, then I can go up to 10 million, right? So I cannot go to 11.5. I could go up to 10 million, right? You would say that way. That's fine, okay? If you go up to 10 million, that means this number will be 103.5, right? Does anyone know why there is a 1.5 difference? I want to see who knows this. Why there's a 1.5 difference here? Is that 1.5? Yeah, why there's $1.5 million difference?
$1.5.
It's because the depreciation, right? 6 million versus 5.5, right?
Oh yeah,
So the difference
3 years.
is 0.5 each year. 3 years is the 1.5, right? So the idea is, you know, you do not go over the unimpaired, the carrying value. So I like this graph. I like this graph. I hope it makes sense, you know, in terms explaining this. Okay, I think it make very good sense here. If you see the picture. Okay. In the other scenario, okay, so for the equipment is 28. That's your unimpaired value. So here is 28. Okay, your recoverable amount is 25. 25 is under 28. So you are able to raise it to 25. Okay, the recoverable. So for the equipment, 25 minus 24, right? That's $1 million impairment reversal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So now if we are done with the impairment, in 2019, what is the depreciation? The last question is, in 2019, what is the depreciation? What's the depreciation in 2019? Okay. So in 2019, my number now is raised to these two numbers. Okay. 102, 25. How many years left? So another 3 years. Another 3 years has passed. So now this one is only 20 minus 3, 17. This one is how much? 7 minus 3, 4. Only 4 years left, right? Okay, so now 102 divided by, 17. This is 6 million a year.
6.
Yeah, and 25 divided by 4, that's 6.25 million. Any question on this question? Is this one of your bonus assignment question?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so that's good. So I'm helping with this. You know, hopefully it makes sense. So I think there are maybe a multiple choice questions on this one, impairment reversal. 3 marks, right? So from this picture, you can see that what's your depreciation? Your depreciation is about this line. Your value is going down naturally. What's your impairment? Is this jump, right? This jump. That's your impairment, right? So you have depreciation, you also have impairment, right? So there's one student asking me this about this question, so I thought, well, I better do this. So I hope I make it sense at least for that student. Doesn't feel like you guys were comfortable with this, do you? If you don't understand, can you tell me what's the question? Which part confused you? So if you don't understand this, please sum up. If you understand this, sum up, please. Okay, so there are lots of students didn't do anything. So yeah, go ahead, Kathleen. You have a question? So how should I interpret for those of you who didn't sum up under either consideration? You don't care about this question? Okay. So I didn't hear any further questions, so I had to move on, I guess. I spent enough time. Take a look. Almost an hour on this question. So I hope it makes sense. So I'm gonna stop recording.